You're watching Drake Wing Gaming. Enjoy the video.
Hey guys and gals, Never here from Drake Wing Gaming. Some of you on Twitter, the Gaming Drag. Today I'm coming back at you with a Let's Play episode of A Fall from Grace. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump right back into it, shall we? Alarm chain, you were up and let's go. Cedric was relieved to hear how well his friend had taken this confession of sorts, even though he still couldn't entirely shake off the feeling of guilt he'd been carrying that afternoon. However, you shouldn't worry about yourself. You're known as an honest lad. They'd never suspect you to have run off with a criminal in their wildest dreams. The fox chuckled. It's more likely they'd imagine you've been kidnapped by the very bandit you've been searching for. Now that would make for a good story. Regardless of what they think, we're both in this mess together, which means we'll just have to deal with whatever comes our way. Yes, you're right. Thanks for understanding. Victor suddenly shoved the coyote, almost making him topple over. Hey! Cedric turned to his friend with a bewildered look on his face, only to see the fox sporting an amused grin. And that is for telling the guards. The two burst out laughing, and Victor soon began to playfully chase Cedric just like the two used to do when they were kids. The old memories unlocked by games such as this were almost overwhelming, and the fox's eyes lit up as he gazed toward the horizon. There's one at last! There's what? Cedric looked up as he tried to see what Victor was pointing at. A farmstead. I've been on the lookout for one for a while now. The coyote gazed at where Victor was pointing. It was a small, lonely building surrounded by dimly lit fields. It had a cozy and lived-in look to it, and the neatly kept vegetable patch displaying the care the owners had for this little farm. Cedric couldn't see any animals. Only the distant sound of clucking reached his ears as he concluded these owners probably kept their chickens and geese around the other side of the building. To the left stood a barn made entirely out of wood, the thatched roof being the only exception, matching that of the main building. The two followed the main path and quickly reached the old front gate. Cedric kept walking, but soon halted once he noticed Victor was standing at the gate. We can ask to sleep here for the night. Perhaps they'd even offer us something to eat. Cedric seemed hesitant. What makes you think they'd let us in? Aren't we supposed to be hiding anyway? Usually I'd say you're right, but today's different, because I can count on you. Thanks to your clothes and demeanor, the two of us will look much more respectable and will pass as some simple travelers. They'll surely let us in. The fox began walking towards the building, and Cedric followed at a distance, still slightly nervous. Come on, Cedric, we'll be perfectly safe. The coyote caught up with Victor, and they reached the main door at the same time. Cedric lifted his arm and knocked a few times. How's your arm, by the way? Is it better? Much better, thanks. It'll probably be as good as tomorrow. Probably be as good as new tomorrow. The sound of footsteps approaching the door became audible as the two quickly began brushing some dirt off their clothes. Victor running a hand through his hair, and Cedric laying the sack with his clothes on the ground beside him. The door swung open, and the two were greeted by the friendly figure of the farmer and the warm light emanating from a fireplace in the room behind him. He was a goat, in his 50s by the look of it, rather muscular with an unsurprisingly long beard. He was dressed in simple, ragged clothes and was smoking an old-looking pipe. He gazed at the two and then smiled gently. Good evening, young sirs. How can I help you? Victor spoke up before Cedric could say anything. Second now. Good evening to you, my good man. We've been traveling all day and are looking for a place where we can rest for the night. Oh, where are you headed to? Eastward to larger towns. We'll be visiting a cousin of mine. Cedric said this, hoping it would add to their credibility. He saw Victor nod, which was encouraging. At least he'd got something right this time. The farmer turned his head to look at the coyote. My, you're well dressed, my good fellow. I'd expect someone of your status to be traveling by carriage or the like. This put Cedric on the spot. He hadn't thought about this detail. Oh, well, yes, of course. It's just that we've been delayed somewhat. Victor jumped in before Cedric was able to say anything. This is a bit embarrassing, but our carriage was attacked by a group of bandits. We made a run for it and have had to continue our journey on foot. Really now, Agnes, come hear this. These young men were attacked by some bandits earlier. The two heard a voice reply from what must have been the kitchen, along with the sound of approaching footsteps. Oh, she's pretty. Bandits! Oh, for heaven's sake, I thought they'd finally left. The farmer's wife soon came into view. She was a collie, only slightly shorter than him, with fairly broad shoulders and a cheerful but matter-of-fact look about her. She was wearing a large apron and had obviously been cooking as the others had been speaking. Good evening, boys. She shook both their hands energetically. You don't mind if I call you that, do you? Cedric smiled. Not at all, ma'am. Call me Agnes. And my name's Harold. Pleasure to meet you, sir. Cedric was about to introduce himself when he noticed Victor turn and give him a serious look. Almost reading his friend's mind, he reasoned that perhaps it's best not to use your actual name when there are guards searching for you up and down the whole county parish. After a second's pause, he spoke. My name is Alistair, and this is my friend, Dorian. Cedric glanced back at his friend, who was now sporting a satisfied grin. Well, now that formalities are out of the way, how about you join us for dinner? Of course, do come and make yourselves comfortable. And with that, the farmer walked back into the building, with Cedric and Victor both following suit. After passing the small entrance, they set foot in what was obviously the main room of the house. A wide old table was at the center, with a large fireplace to their left and steamed-up windows to their right. A slightly crooked door was also visible and must have led into the kitchen, judging by the pleasant smell emanating from the room beyond it. Harold gestured at a couple of chairs lining the old table. Sit down and make yourselves at home. I'll fetch us something to drink. And with that, both him and Agnes appeared into the kitchen. Cedric and Victor sat down next to each other on the surprisingly comfy chairs. There was nothing on the table except a few old lit candles, which gave the place an almost medieval look. As Cedric took in these picturesque surroundings, he heard his friend whisper, Good job, my boy. He turned to look at Victor. The fox's face was half lit quite dramatically by the candlelight, almost resembling a Baroque painting. Cedric thought he'd never seen someone so beautiful. Hey, pretty boy, are you there? Victor gave a little laugh as he saw his friend looking at him with such intensity. Oh, yes, sorry. The coyote blushed a little as he started nervously tapping his fingers on the wooden surface. Harold soon reappeared, holding a couple of mugs. Here you go, lads. I hope it's to your liking. I brew this cider myself. The two thanked him as they tasted their drinks. Cedric's eyes widened as he put down his mug after taking a sip. It's delicious! Thank you, thank you. Harold put his elbows on the table, leaning in a little with his fingers crossed. I'm sorry about what happened to you two. We used to have whole heaps of trouble with bandits round here, what with the roads being as narrow as they are. In fact, there used to be talks of an entire gang hiding in the forest. Really? Cedric could tell Victor was rather amused by this, but was doing his best to hide it. The goat shook his head. Oh, it used to be awful. Come to think of it, I did hear about these bandits myself a while back. Didn't they attack a wealthy lord somewhere nearby about a year ago? Yes, indeed. 'Twas the nobleman and politician Lord Sanderson, as he was riding alone. Used to be a very foolish thing to do around here, I might add. Stripped him of all his riches, they did, and damn near cut his hands off. Why, those wretches even took his clothes. He was sent back to town in rags. Good heavens! Victor was obviously enjoying himself, leading Cedric to wonder if perhaps one of the bandits the farmer had been speaking ill of was none other than the fox. But it's been a while since we heard about someone's carriage being attacked, so we had assumed all the local rogues had left for some reason or another. But now that I think about it, Agnes told me she saw a group of guards pass by this morning. Might that be connected to the thieves you encountered? Yes. We weren't far from the town, and they caught word of the attack shortly after. But between you and me, they were of no help whatsoever. Harold laughed. I can't say I don't share that sentiment, my boy. He sat back in his chair as he drank more of the cider. We're lucky to have found this place. We're very grateful for your hospitality if we can repay you in any way. Nonsense. I'm sure you've lost enough to those scum as is. We're very happy to have you as our guests, and you can sleep in the barn too if you like. That'd be perfect. Thank you so much, sir. The goat laughed heartily at this reply. Harold, please. I'm hardly a sir. After a few minutes, Agnes reappeared, holding some plates filled with steaming hot chicken along with corn, beans, and a few other vegetables. Here we go, boys. Hope this food is to your liking. I'll help you with the other plates, my dear. The goat got up and walked back into the kitchen. Thanks, darling. They're all on the right with the cutlery. Don't break anything this time. Harold replied jokingly, When have I ever broken something? A few moments later, the four of them were all sitting at the table enjoying their meal. The food was simple but absolutely delicious, and it wasn't long before both Cedric and Victor had almost licked their plates clean. So how did the two of you meet, if you don't mind me asking? Not at all, not at all. I've always lived close by, and Agnes here comes from a town neighboring mine, so we'd often see each other at markets, fairs, and the like. I always used to think he was the sweetest feller I'd ever set eyes on. Harold chuckled a little. So after a few years, we spoke of getting married. I waited longer than all my friends, something that often take jabs at me about. I just wanted to be sure. There's no point in spending the rest of your life with someone you don't care for. My parents didn't think much of him at first, and that's an understatement. It didn't take long for his charm to win them over, though. As for my parents, well, they were both dead by then, which meant I'd gotten used to living alone and being self-sufficient. And do you two still love each other? Very much so. I always poke fun at Harry, but the truth is I adore him just as much as I did 15 years ago. Likewise, my darling. The warm look the two gave each other was so full of love, Cedric almost felt his heart melt. He thought such people could only exist in fairy tales, yet here they were sitting right in front of him. That is done. This one's got a little bit more. Oh, playing musical chairs with these little water cans. He wished he too could live in such a picturesque location with a person he deeply cared for someday. While thinking of this setting, an image of Victor's face came to him almost automatically, and soon Cedric found that this thought couldn't escape his mind. Not that he minded that, in all honesty. The chances of something like that ever happening were very slim, and he knew that. It was still good to let your imagination run wild every so often, he thought. How about you lads? You're still young, of course, but is there anyone you fancy? I bet you both lovely gents have your eye on some pretty beau from your hometown. Huh. Cedric suddenly felt a wave of anxiety hit him as he tried to think of how to answer that. He turned to face Victor, but the fox was evidently waiting for him to speak first. After a few incredibly long seconds, he replied rather quietly. Oh, that's a complicated subject. I'm sure I've fancied some people, but I don't think it's ever been something serious. Don't I know it? You still have your whole life ahead of you, my boy. No point in rushing into things. Take it from me. And you being the heir of the wealthy family means most of the girls in town will have set their eyes on you, so you have ample choice when the time comes. Cedric smiled with relief, having managed to give what the couple seemed to consider a satisfactory answer. Filled with some fresh confidence, he turned to face Victor. What about you, Dorian? The fox was also looking slightly uncomfortable, although Cedric couldn't imagine why. Well, I did fancy this girl from our town a few years ago. Her name was Elsie, and she was the prettiest fox I'd ever set eyes on. We'd meet behind the tower on the town's outskirts every evening and talk about everything under the sun. I really loved her. Felt like I'd never met someone as wonderful as her before. One day her family moved away and I was heartbroken. Well, you can't win them all, I suppose, but it took me a long time to get over it. Agnes reached out to hold Victor's hand, as both she and Harold looked touched by the fox's tale. I'm so sorry to hear that, my dear. But don't worry, I'm sure you will meet someone new eventually. There are many folks in this world, after all. Victor wiped what must have been a tear from his eye. Thank you, you're very sweet. I suppose you're right. Cedric sat there in silence, almost dumbfounded. This last revelation had been an absolute gut punch. His hopes and dreams of living with Victor rapidly vanished before him. Of course the fox couldn't love him, just like most other men. Just like most other men, he was attracted to girls. Alright, y'all, I'm actually going to pause it right there. I've had a long day. Thank y'all so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and check out our Patreon if you can. It always helps. Alrighty, I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye!